sorry to get started a few minutes late, but we have a fairly decent agenda, so we'll try to move into it now. And I know we've got several folks that are here to present to us, but I wanted to first welcome those of the members and the representatives that were able to come today for this meeting, very important quarterly meeting of the beautiful Buffalo River Action Committee, meeting the direction of the governor's call to come together quarterly for a collaborative and cooperative discussion and reflection on the resources that are offered by the Buffalo River and its watershed and how the state is benefiting from those. So we're going to be talking a little bit and updating each other. As a first order of business, we'll move into the approval of the July 27th, 17 meeting minutes. So hopefully you have those before you. And I believe we're sent those in advance of the meeting. So without exception, if anyone makes a motion, we can make a formal motion to accept these minutes. So, okay, we'll let the record reflect Director Holland has made a motion.
Second.
Second by Director Webb. Anybody else? All those in favor? Opposed? All right, well, without exception, we'll accept those minutes of the July 17th meeting. The second item I have listed under executive discussion is a reflection, as I think there's a calendar in front of you, or maybe not, maybe it's just in front of me, of January. Yeah, maybe you don't have one for the other one. Okay, well, we were looking to set a first quarter meeting date for 2018. We have some business to take care of actually in January. In terms of submittal to the governor of our first annual report, it will be the 30th of January. So we were looking to see if there might be a point that we could come together in the first quarter to accept that report before it's formally transmitted to the governor, or we can do that via conference call and email communication if we prefer to do a face-to-face meeting after submittal of the report. So I guess I'll leave that to you. I don't know, Heather, did we have preferred dates, or did? I'm sorry.
We left it over to the team.
Okay, so does anybody have any thoughts about that? Or do you have a preference or recommendation, Heather, in terms
I
of?
think that since we may want to come in together again, perhaps Tuesday the 23rd of January,
Okay.
or even that Thursday the 25th. Tuesday might give us a little more leeway to finish the report.
All right, well, if y'all will consider that in your calendars, does anyone have a known conflict at that point in time of that week?
I actually do. On the 25th, my niece is getting married.
Well,
And I will
congratulations.
be cast out of the family if I'm not there. So.
Will that party event extend as early as the 23rd, or do you think you'll be available? All right. Well, all right, well, let's commit to the 23rd. I think that'll give us some time. I actually have a small homework assignment after this meeting maybe that we can talk about that may fit quite well in with those dates, so we can talk about that here in a minute in respect to that report being due. And you should have received some components of the report which we've sent out, but I'll at least a framework, if you will, but we'll talk about that under the next agenda item. Wanted to then move into quickly, I have a short presentation on what we'd like to show today or present to you as well as the public. An introduction to the beautiful Buffalo River Action Committee website. We've been working to have that, as you know, when we began this process. We hosted some material on our agency website, as some of you adopted that. But since then, through some funding we had available, we were able to set up a hosted website that is on arkansas.gov now. It's an independent website. So it's being managed right now by my agency website managers, and our communications team, but with the direction and input of the executive subcommittee. And so they're more than happy to turn that over to anybody else that would like that opportunity. I'm told that they're doing a great job. But I wanted to run you through, this is how it appears today. And I will tell you, I don't think they would be offended if I told you it was a work in progress, but it's a definite, significant accomplishment that they've got this set up. If you'll notice, this website obviously reflects first the photography of the area and the river itself, but it's a fairly simplified website at this point, but we hope it's populated already with a lot of information, but it also has some access points that I can run you through. If you're looking at the screen, those of you, I think I have my contact in now, I can actually see Heather, but of course we have just a simple statement about what BBRAC is and our mission, if I can do this right. So that's kind of a statement. There's actually a copy of the governor's letter or call to action and in that part of the section. So it's just a brief, it gives people the actual information they can go into. There's also, we'll be adding some information, and I handed that to you as a meeting, a statement that was a clarification or simplified statement of the BBRAC mission statement that will be included on the website. So I wanted you to have a copy of that before it was posted. Meeting information, this is just to tell the public when our meetings are. If you can see that, basically this reflects the meeting materials from the previous quarterly meetings we've had. You can go back in or your directors can, peruse what we've reviewed and what we, also the meetings and the summary reports from the Watershed management plan meetings. So all in a nice cohesive package. And then even special reports or presentations that have been made to the committee or action team. So that's all now housed in one nice little location, which will be helpful as we compile the report. There's also a couple of extra pages. The resource page gives you links to information about some of your own work as your agencies, and data this is really more about some of the resources that are available to those in the community or in the watershed that may want to do work or find out information about it. We'll be adding to that page. And I think an important section, the state of the science, which is not going to click on. Let me see. Let me go back. I'm not getting there, but it is there. This is just a summary of some of the data reports that we currently already have on the watershed. And what's beneficial, I think, to this is it compiles the data relative to the watershed in one place. So while we have maybe our own water quality data or national park data, this is that data that's relevant to the watershed itself. So we'll be putting water quality data specific to the watershed. So someone doesn't have to go read our whole, 303 or 305B reports or whatever. They can actually pull to just the watershed information in one place. And that's kind of reflected here under ADQ. So I think that'll be interesting if you want to kind of see there's not only one report, but a number of reports you can access. And this is information through a copy report and other things that you can find out information about the watershed. And we will fine tune that as we go. Now, I did want to point out, not only did we want one of the primary focuses of this website was one of the directives in the call to action was to provide a way for public to be involved in this process and to gain information and educational resources about the watershed. And so while we've had the watershed management planning process going, I know we've had several opportunities for the public to participate and be involved in the meetings in a more interactive fashion. So we want the website to continue that opportunity. And so there is a place where you can you can contact the committee now, and this will come to not an agency website, but to a special email site that's hosted on arkansas.gov for the committee. It'll be vetted through the executive subcommittee for responses, but you can contact us if this goes. And in this contact, you can either submit your name, hopefully you submit your name so we can respond to you directly. If it's not, so if you don't submit a name, we'll take your comment under advisement, but we won't be able to respond directly to your question or comment. But if you'll provide an email, obviously we can respond. And then you can send us a message as a committee if there's something of interest that you'd like us to consider in a conversation here at a meeting, or if there's something you'd like us to discuss even separately from a meeting. This is not intended to be a comment response page. It's not a legal process like we would do at our agency. but it is our effort to reach out and provide information. Also, if you have a proposed presentation that you think would be beneficial for this committee to hear from the public, we invite you to offer that suggestion to us through this comment. So comment suggestions, prefer, it's not going to become a blog or a public record or anything like that, but it'll be an opportunity to have public involvement. So hopefully that engagement opportunity that will begin, and it won't be the initial engagement. Obviously, we've had a lot of engagement thanks to ANRC's work, but we'd like to have more and broaden that engagement. So that's the website. Lastly, I was going to flip real quick to go back and do this. We, of course, not only have gone computer, but we've got a Facebook page, which that's what it looks like. If you know, that's the Facebook page. If you want to join the Facebook community on this, you're welcome to join that Facebook page, and there's going to be postings on it. Right now it's posted about this meeting. There's some other opportunities there. So social media live that we'll be feeding, and of course, we can't live without Twitter. And so Twitter is, unless I hit that wrong. Yes, and we have all 12 followers, so those of you that do Twitter, please follow us. So I believe half of those come from my agency right now, so, or more. So if you would like to follow us, unfortunately no one knew about this till today, so that's understandable. But we'll be doing the analytics on it though. I mean, we have some analytic experts in our agency. We'll be doing some analytics and trying to see how we can, we reach out to the public, and that is one of the goals of the governor, is to be able to reach information and get information out to the public in a more cohesive educational format. So with that, I just wanted to bring that up. And also then, so that was one area that I know the executive subcommittee worked on. Also, in a report back from the subcommittee, and I would have Donnelly Davis come up and do this, but she was diagnosed yesterday with strep throat, so we've asked her not to be here today. I think you'll appreciate that. But the other discussion that the subcommittee had with me, and hopefully with you as they came back to you is on the governor's call to establish metrics or goals and objectives and metrics for this group, and how we can advance not so much this group, but the watershed itself, setting some metrics around the watershed, being able to measure how the watershed is performing as not only as a resource, but as a asset to the state, and we'll talk about that. We've done some discussion on metrics, and some of that will probably be part of the governor's report. So Heather, is that what you wanted me to talk about on that, or was there specific metrics you want me to run through?
No, just the call to.
You might want to come up to, can you come up to the mic? I'm sorry.
Just in discussion, you've had assigned your staff to come up with some agency-specific metrics that are things that we're already measuring as an agency, to consider those as a metric for BBRAC. So you just wanted to make that recommendation to the panel.
Right, I know many of us, all of us, I believe, went through strategic planning efforts this year, submitted strategic plans, and posted them on our website, hopefully upon approval by the governor's office. And hopefully there's some strategic objective or goal that you've set, that a component of it, the Buffalo River initiatives or results of the Buffalo River, could be part of satisfying that goal. So rather than create a whole nother set of goals, I'm not asking you that, but if there's a goal that you can convey to us that's in your strategic plan that we can measure, maybe specific to the Buffalo River, and that data would feed to your overall measurement of your goal, we would like to use that as part of our metrics and goals. So we'd like to, align our goal in this initiative with our overall agency mission and goals. So I know we have several, and so if you would please look at those metrics. We would like our staff to continue to develop these metrics, but we don't want to replace your talent or knowledge about your area of specialization with ours. So we want to make sure that we seek one or two high-level metrics that you would like to track as an agency, or we can track holistically as BBRAC around the Buffalo watershed. And I would just encourage you to look and see. And that is kind of the homework assignment I'm asking for, is if you could provide one or two high-level metrics that we would propose in the governor's report to be tracked. And probably for the first year, we would be doing more of a baselining of that metric with the idea that over time, you know, we would begin to create a historical understanding of that particular metric over time. So, but I would like that recommendation to come from you to me and to our staff, specifically to Heather. You can forward it either directly to me or through your executive subcommittee member to Donnelly and Heather. And that way we can incorporate that in the draft that we put together for your review on the 23rd. So, and if you have more questions about that, we can give you some more support on that later. But I just wanted to make sure that we asked for that homework. The other, I guess, an example, you know, we've got some examples, like in our case, we may be looking at, we've actually got some idea, the number of ERW river miles assessed in the watershed per cycle, you know, showing that we're going to be studying the river. You know, we want to measure how much can we get accomplished with the funding we have available, and perhaps maybe increase funding toward that as we. So that's something we might look, or the percent of miles that attain their designation uses, and not that every mile will. So we want to make sure that we're measuring that. Some ideas that have come up for tourism, maybe the number of tourism dollars spent in the watershed per year, the number of tourists visiting the watershed, or there may be a more smarter goal that you might want something even, you know, out of state or anything. Whatever you need to measure, the number of swim beach bacterial samples taken, if there are some, I don't know if there are some beaches in the watershed, I assume there are along the river or in these watershed. Something that would be, and forest management might be another one. So maybe for GIS, we thought funding for tax parcel data collection, maybe increase in funding, you know, how much funding is available this year for that, or, you know, or you may have other, the number of acres of quail habitat might be a game and fish commission, you know, goal or something, or whatever appropriate goal. So we want to, I'm not going to tell you, I should go down to it. So number of nutrient management plans, or number of 319 grant projects that were awarded in the watershed, you know, there may be things that fit or do not fit. So we wanted to kind of come up with some things that we're going to use as a state to show that this state is fully committed to protection and enhancement of that watershed as a resource, not only, you know, for all our purposes and goals. So anyway, but that was kind of some of the ideas we had. But please look at your, I think those were pulled somewhat from your agency strategic plans too, or that would align with those hopefully. And so if you can let us do that, we can align them back to our governor's goals. In fact, if we did it as strategic plan, it'll probably be part of our report to show that we're working toward his goal. Anyway, in continuation of the discussion on the draft governor's report, I really wanted to give my thanks to the executive subcommittee, as they have spent some time and effort in putting together as a draft report shared out, I think, to some of you. It's a fairly high-level summary. In addition to the first-year priorities, what we haven't yet been able to populate in the report is some additional detailing about the watershed, the Buffalo River, and some of the background and other information that might be helpful to the general public as they read about tourism in the watershed, why we consider it a high value, you know, what are those unique species and habitats that we're protecting, you know, in the game and fish world, I guess, if you will, or what are those acres of agricultural resource that are being able to be developed in that watershed as a result of the high quality water and habitat that we have. So maybe those are things Wes can work on, and maybe ANRC in terms of some of those activities that we're working with some of the districts on. So that was my second assignment, was if you could help us write a one-page little or paragraph, 2 paragraphs, historical summary from your perspective of why the Buffalo watershed is meaningful to Arkansas and to your agency. We'd like to put it in your words into the report so that it's not, again, too historical, but, you know, really gives us something to put in that document as we then begin to reflect on some of the comments that we've heard from other groups at these meetings. We'll be talking about some of the work being done and the commitments that have been made with the nature conserve, the conservation easement work that we've heard about. We'll be talking about some of the unpaved roads work with the feral hogs. Might be something that we can hear from Director Holland more about in his summary, maybe you can help us on that. But if y'all could help us get those paragraphs together by the 15th of January, hopefully that's not too heavy of a deadline with the holidays. If y'all could bring that with those two metrics and forward those, then it'll make that report come together a lot faster and more effectively. So, at this point, we expect to have an executive summary, a history of the Buffalo National River, information about agriculture and communities, and information about tourism. So that's the goal, with the idea that we will be recommending, we'll have an executive summary of the watershed management plan, some of the recommendations of that management plan, obviously included in the recommendations to the governor, as well as some of the metrics that we hope to establish as a measurement technique. So that's how we see the report coming, or as it's been proposed to me, and I believe that's a good approach by the executive committee. We would like to keep the overall report concise, so that's why we're only asking for a paragraph or two per each of those topics again. So hopefully all of you will be voluntold to make those assignments. Is there anybody that feels like that's too big of an ask by January 15th? Okay. And I just advise you to work through your subcommittee member to get that in, so that I know many of y'all have other things going on here. So, any comments before I move on? That was really quick and a lot of information to cover, but I wanted to make sure. Have you all received the short report that was, some of you, I don't know if the public's been provided, this is just an initial summary of our first year priorities and some of the work and who's attended the meetings and just kind of an accounting of what we've done so far. So this, along with this information you provide, will be a draft that at the January meeting we'll be able to disseminate in its draft form and review. Hopefully we'll get it to you before the meeting so that we can comment on it. Okay. I know a number of the recommendations will be looking around unpaved roads grants program, some of the progress that was made, maybe some things that letters to county judges, countywide chambers of commerce. There's been some discussion about some other recommendations, such as a Buffalo River Field Day, potentially Buffalo River Watershed research that might be informed by the Watershed Management Plan, and then perhaps even other engagement opportunities. One of the things that we've suggested, maybe even a Buffalo River art contest. I know the Illinois River Watershed has done something and made it more of a community-hosted art gallery on the watershed. We thought that might be something of value for those that are not particularly interested in mining data. They might prefer to see the artistic talents of the watershed displayed. So, and that might include out-of-state contributions as well as in-state contributions. So anyway, but those are some things that we can talk about. Those are some recommendations as we look at ways to expand early actions of the group to enhance and educate about the value of the watershed. So Heather, did I cover those? Did you want me to touch on any of those? You want to come forward again? I'm sorry.
No, I think that covers the executive subcommittee report just fine. Director Keough, would you like to move into the agency report outs at this time?
That's fine. I skipped over that, didn't I? All right. Sorry, I moved out of that. Did you have anything? You don't have anything to add to the subcommittee? We'll move backwards.
No, on the subcommittee stuff, so thank you. I was supposed to report on that. I got volunteered. I wasn't at the meeting, so they voted me to report. So
sorry, I took over because I knew Don was absent.
So you saved me from that, so thank you. What I do want to mention for this committee to know, and you'll recognize, I think the structure of what you have right now will look similar to kind of the strategic plan, as Director Keough mentioned. If y'all have input, feedback, a different direction you'd like to see it go, please let us know. We as the subcommittee, we're looking for some sort of framework to some starting point. And so if there's something that works better, makes more sense to y'all, please let us know. We can adjust that and can make it look how you would like to be most beneficial. And really what you'll see in there, a lot of it's a capturing of what we've done in this, so each of these meetings is kind of grabbing what we did there, and if y'all see something we didn't mention or we gave short shrift to something, let us know, because we're happy to flesh that out. And then the assignments the director mentioned, we can roll those in and incorporate to really flesh out the report. The second thing on those recommendations, some of those build upon items that we've talked about the last couple meetings. Really that is kind of something for y'all as a committee to chew on a little bit, see what you think about the next steps and what works, kind of some food for thought, really. So that was why we have kicked those around a little as a subcommittee and thought that they were good enough that it might merit you guys thinking about it, your time to think about it a little bit. So that was all for the executive subcommittee report. So if you want to do report outs, thank you.
And again, those recommendations are really apart, in addition and apart from the watershed management plan recommendations, which are obviously focused on technical and resource use in the watershed. But again, to highlight those, I think you've got them on your agenda. You can look back at those and see if you have any positive or commentary that you'd like to include as we advance those recommendations. Or if you think of something else, this was just coming out of the executive subcommittee, again, those being an unpaved roads grants program dedicated to the Buffalo River watershed, Buffalo River Fill Day. We were hoping maybe to work with, I think the recommendation that came to me was to potentially work with maybe the Buffalo Outdoor Center and others that might be interested, and that, to make sure that we're not duplicating what they already do, but enhancing some educational conservation workshops. The committee recommended, again, a watershed research team, and then engagement opportunities, one which was the art contest that came up. So others could come up for them. So anyway, with that, I'm going to stop now and go back to the agenda and do agency report outs, because I skipped over that in my welcoming statement. So I wanted to come back and let each agency, if you have something to report on the watershed, I'm going to maybe start with you, Director Webb, and let you talk a little bit about tourism and what's going on out there.
Yeah, and I've asked a colleague from my department, Matt McNair, who is the project officer, environmental review coordinator for the department's outdoor recreation grants program, and also on the BBRAC executive subcommittee to kind of give you guys a briefing of tourism and Buffalo River watershed. Matt?
Yes,
Thanks, sir.
Give me out, put my, all right, thanks. I saw the word presentation, and that usually connotes a PowerPoint, so I went ahead. Don't worry though, it's short. I'm not going to get too carried away on you. So one of the things that the Department of Parks and Tourism does, we have measurable metrics, we have quantifiable things, but what we really do is we tell stories at the Department of Parks and Tourism. And I know the people in this room, when people say the Buffalo River watershed, it is not hard for y'all to see what's going on. It's the watershed. But when the average person hears Buffalo River watershed, they stick with one thing, and that's the Buffalo National River. And the Arkansas Department of Parks and Tourism recognizes that, and we heavily promote the Buffalo National River on our website and a lot of our publications. Tourism is around $7 billion industry annually in the state of Arkansas, and while I don't have an exact number for the Buffalo National River, it does draw about 1 million visitors annually. And within that, we promote a lot of really traditional activities for outside recreation, like hiking and camping and canoeing, and now even, I don't know, trying to pet an elk on the nose. So that's not the only thing that goes on, though. So what you have to think about is what else goes on in the watershed that draws visitors and promotes tourism in the state of Arkansas. And one thing that we promote pretty heavily on our website, and that does draw a lot of visitors to our state and draw a lot of money to our state, are designated scenic byways. And there are two in the Buffalo National River watershed. And one of the ways that we measure dollars spent in the state is through what we call person trips. And that's a trip of more than 50 miles that isn't related to school or work. And there are millions and millions of individual person trips per year in the state, and a lot of them go right through the watershed. And that's great, it's on the highway. It might seem slightly contradictory between, canoeing or sightseeing and actually driving through, but it's something that happens. Along with that, though, and this is somewhat officially promoted and somewhat unofficial, are motorcycle trips. We heavily promote motorcycle trips on the ADBT website, but a very cursory Google search will turn up hundreds of different motorcycle clubs, both on and off-road, that promote trips through the Buffalo River watershed, both on-road and not necessarily off-road, but through dirt roads. And you can find these all over. And in fact, I grew up in the Tomahawk sub-watershed, and if y'all ever go up there, I'm going to point out that the correct pronunciation of that is Tomahawk. There's an A in there, but it shouldn't be. It's the Tomahawk watershed. And my dad called me not too long ago, and he'd seen an army of enduro motorcycles charging through on a big, I presume, it could be a cross-country trip. He said they were all decked out with big bags, helmets, and they didn't even stop. He said he was pretty upset. It was a big deal on the bridge. Nobody had ever seen anything like that before. But that's out there, and that's the thing that's starting to happen. And as far as these back road trips go, that can be an issue where we run into this kind of the watershed love to death type of thing. So it's something to think about. But also thinking about those guys going through the watershed, you think about what else goes on here. Well, people live here. And that's something that sometimes gets forgotten in a push for drawing outside visitors into the state. And so what I've got here is a crop cover map for the Buffalo River watershed, specifically around the Tomahawk sub-watershed. As you can see, a lot of it's forested and a lot of it is, that's kind of like what they call it, rangeland on the crop cover map, bizarre hayfields. And what you've got up here are mostly smaller dairy and beef cattle operations and people working small family farms. And at first, when I was thinking about this, there seemed to be something of a disconnect for me. But then I got to thinking, and I think this is actually where the Department of Parks and Tourism could be the most important partner on this committee of telling a story about Arkansas. Because another thing that we've begun to heavily promote on our website is the idea of agritourism. And these are just a few of the ones in the watershed that we are actively linking on our website. We have farmers markets in the watershed and also guest farms. They range from one close to Parthenon that is mainly an urban farm but also offers classes and guided hikes by reservation, all the way up to a fully immersive guest farm near Harriet that operates as a B&B. And you can either just stay in their cabin and be left alone, or you can go there and actually do chores and work on the farm and go out with the farmer and do different things. And what this represents to me is maybe the best opportunity for people to hold on to a traditional agricultural lifestyle in watershed while working with partners at ADEQ and on BBRAC generally to maintain the health of the watershed. When I go back home, a lot of the guys I know that have these smaller outfits, their main concern, they want to keep the watershed beautiful and they want to sustain it. But what they worry about are water access to the water supplies that are in the watershed for their cattle, and also about the possibility of overly onerous regulations coming down from the work that we're doing. And I think that by helping people hang on to their farms and make money in a new way while partnering with us to maintain the health of the watershed, again, it's a really important component of the story that ADBT is going to be trying to tell going forward with everybody here's help. And it all boils down really to perception. Arkansas has got a long, long history of serving as a blank slate for people in other parts of the country. We might be the most American thing that ever American America, or we might be completely outside of the mainstream, and it shifts, and it tends to shift. And one of the things that people really think about is that river. And all it takes is one picture of a really bad moss outbreak for people to think, oh no, the river's dirty. It might just be one day. But it's on social media and it's amplified. Everything's amplified. And so one of our jobs is going to be not only maintaining the health of the watershed, but also helping people to see in the watershed what they want to see, and also helping people to live in the watershed be who they want to be. And everybody's going to have to work together. I think telling stories is a way that we do that. So that is what we do at ADBT.
Thank you, Matt. I think you did a nice job of really kind of showing where the natural resource and the environment intersects with tourism. He mentioned that we have it's about a $7 billion industry in Arkansas, tourism. The governor often makes the point that it's the state's second largest industry. It's one of the fastest growing. And from a standpoint of getting out-of-state visitors to Arkansas, one of our big attractions, national attractions, and probably the first we had was the Buffalo River. And so it's very important to the economy of Arkansas, and I thought Matt did a great job of explaining that. Thank you, sir. Director?
Thank you, that was excellent, and I agree, being born and raised here, it's always been a point of pride when you talk about Arkansas. In fact, did share in Texas last week, the beauty and our natural state and the attractions that we have to offer as part of learning more about what we do, but the importance of what we do, but also the importance and the value it is to be just able to live and earn a nice living and be able to have a high quality of life while you're doing so. We know that's a high value in today's marketplace, especially in employee recruiting. So we need that aspect of it too. So with the broadening of electronic access, obviously people can live in a lot more remote places and enjoy that quality life if you prefer that quiet lifestyle, and yet still be able to keep your family well taken care of in terms of financial needs and well, health protection and all those good things. Food on the table, as they say. So anyway, well, I'm going to turn now to our health department representative. Stephanie, would you like to add anything?
And we don't have a report for this month, so that was a great report, Matt. I'm going to make a note that I don't need to follow Director Webb's report next time. I'm going to try to sit in a different area.
Very good. I'll skip over me and come back to me. Director Holland, did you have anything you'd like to update us on?
I do have some things, but we're on the agenda down item F, and I'm just going to follow up on Raymond's comments.
Excellent, thank you. And Wes Ward, you changed your appearance today, so no, I'm happy to have
A little more hair. Yeah, I'm just going to give you an update on the Feral Hog Task Force status. They're having their next meetings, the last meeting of this calendar year, tomorrow. They have broken the task force into several different subcommittees, one on policy, education, and one other, and those will be making their recommendations to the full task force tomorrow. We have a report due to the legislature at the end of this calendar year, and the task force will consider it and will continue on through June. But they're making some progress and a lot of ideas and discussion going on, but that is such an important issue to every county in the state, and we now have feral hogs everywhere, and they're just very detrimental to the environment and to businesses, and so it's something that's really on the forefront of our mind. And it's, of course, in the Buffalo River Watershed, it's a very big issue too. So we're hoping to get some good recommendations coming out of that committee.
excellent. That is important, especially as we monitor the watershed and understanding that while it is a managed watershed in many respects, it's also a natural watershed and subject to the impacts of those natural occurrences such as feral hogs and things that are perhaps not within our direct control at times. And therefore the watershed must be adaptive to those. So I appreciate the work of your agency to try to bring some control on that process and at least help give us guidance on what we can do to put our efforts in. I reflect on hogs. Hogs are an iconic symbol of our state in many ways for other reasons. So perhaps not feral hogs, but in fact we were discussing in recommendations. I said perhaps we need to have those iconic, rather than hog statues everywhere, maybe we need to make the new mascot of the state buffaloes everywhere for the Buffalo River. So I'm still trying to relate the buffalo to the Buffalo River relationship, if there's a history there, so perhaps someone can educate me on that. But anyway, with that, I'll turn to the next Forensic Game and Fish Commission.
Sure. I think this is, I'm Jennifer Sheehan with the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. I am sitting in for Assistant Deputy Director Chris Callclasher, who should have been sitting in for Director Jeff Crow. So on behalf of the agency and the commission, I apologize for the third round draft pick. But Staff of the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission and the Buffalo National River have produced the Buffalo River Floating Use and Angler Creel Survey. It covers September 2013 to August 2014 and includes information on floater angler characteristics, catch rates, and boat counts. It can be made available through contacting AGFC or possibly the BBRAC website would be a good place for it. Game and Fish has shared BBRAC's information through our communications division as it becomes available to us, and we also have a link to BBRAC's website through our website.
Very good, and I encourage the other agencies to do the same on your websites if you have access to that, or as well as anybody in the public that have posted websites for your businesses or your communities to consider that as a viable or helpful link. So thank you. That sounds interesting. The survey is now a survey of certain fishing opportunities. Is that right? Again, angler fishing. Okay, great. That's good news. And I think hopefully we can put some metrics in around the productivity of that sport. So anyway, and we're down there.
Yes, I am excited to share with the committee and also the public that our statewide aerial imagery project that we launched back last January has been successfully completed. And the agency has just taken delivery of all of that data. We'll be working to make it available. It'll cover all of Arkansas, but particularly for this group, the Buffalo River Watershed, for the agencies on December 13th, so that'll be next week. Our agency will be hosting a GIS coordination working group, which is going to be the GIS staff from your agencies at the Real Estate Commission at 10 o'clock, and the Real Estate Commission boardroom not too far from the Capitol. And so please advise your GIS staff in your agencies that we'll be having that meeting, and that's when we'll be working with those folks to let them know how to access the data. And then we will also be shortly thereafter making the data available at gis.arkansas.gov. So really excited to be able to share that. That's a brand new update of aerial imagery that we haven't had at a very high resolution. It will help all of the agencies as well as the cities and counties in the state to be able to use that layer for a variety of different things, but particularly in the watershed it'll be useful as well. So.
That's excellent. Glad to hear that progress was made and that we have advantageous use of that information going forward. I think that will really help in some of those recommendations coming again out of the ANRC efforts on the watershed management plan and those other efforts. I have a brief report out from ADQ. I'd like to highlight a couple of things that are going on from what I call the regulatory side of our shop and some of the scientific side of our shop. Before I go too far, I don't know if Dr. Blands is in the room. Dr. Robert Blands is sitting in our audience. He has become a rock star of sorts, not only for us. He's always been a rock star at the agency, but he will now be serving in two capacities at the federal level, so I wanted to report that to you. He's as our Chief Technical Officer, but he has been nominated and accepted on the EPA Scientific Advisory Board, which is a fairly prestigious, but a lot of work, I think, I've heard, where those scientific advisors will advise EPA on their standard setting and federal work that they do. So in a very key and important role, and we're pleased that the state of Arkansas has a representative on that board. He also was nominated and accepted to serve on the Board of Scientific Counselors to the Research and Development arm of EPA. It's called the BOSC, I guess. And he will be serving, I believe, if I get this right, Bob, and you can correct me, as a vice chair of the Sustainable Waters Committee or something.
Something like that.
Subcommittee, something like that. Subcommittee of this research group. So looking at those opportunities. So again, national issues, not necessarily, but obviously a lot of state input. So for those of you in Parks and Tourism concerned about where are the regulations going and what are the regulatory actions we will have firsthand input to the science used in making some of that determination at the federal level, and obviously rely on Bob a lot on the state level as well. So congratulations to Dr. Bland's and his accomplishments and the recognition. Those of you that have worked with him, and I have for a number of years, know that he is not only an excellent scientist, except for the fact he went to Texas A&M. We forgive him for that. He has a PhD in civil engineering, and it offers a lot of great insight to environmental solutions, both in air and water quality and land efforts, but also is very pragmatic and results oriented in his work. So with that, I did want to move into some of the science we've been doing as an agency. We've been doing monitoring, as we always do seasonally. There's been monitoring going on, and we're beginning to collect monitoring data from other parties as part of our biennial process, where we collect data from the National Park Service and other entities specific to the Buffalo watershed, but across the entire state, as we look at our stream water quality data sets. And so one of the specific projects that we did in the Buffalo watershed this summer was a Mill Creek study. I know that's been one of the tributaries to the Buffalo that we've been focusing on E. coli sampling in that area due to some concerns that were raised by interested public. And we did some work in 2016 and now 2017. We did 11 sites in 2016, took 129 samples, and we found 0 violations of the applicable water quality standards in 2016. 2017, our sampling was completed. We've done 10 sites. Repeated, were those the same sites or additional sites? Same sites. 10 of the 11 sites. We collected 98 samples again in 2017, again finding 0 violations of water quality standards. So good news for the Mill Creek residents and those who interact with that stream. I know that a robust sampling of 98 to 129 samples is not a minor task. It required a lot of work on our staff to be there on a weekly or bi-weekly basis in some cases, and so a lot of effort to assess that stream, but just wanted some assurance that the E. coli is definitely being addressed in that stream, and we're finding that it does comply with all our water quality standards and protective of uses in that stream. So we continue to look at all the streams, though. That's not to say we want to, this just begins to give us a little bit more than a one-time look at a stream. We want to get that historical approach and see if this is a continuing thing. As I mentioned, as we collect data, and we'll be looking at data that's coming in, we know some of that data will raise some concerns, and we'll begin to assess what that data means. One of the efforts that we undertook this year was to review our assessment methodology that will be used to determine whether a stream is impaired or not, or will be recommended for further evaluation or perhaps even regulatory action, such as a total maximum daily load process through federal action. And that process, for the first time ever, the agency took that assessment methodology process and document out for public comment. We actually initiated a stakeholder process initially. We completed that, and the draft assessment methodology that resulted from that stakeholder process went out for public comment on October 12th. The comment period officially was closed on November 13th, and a number of comments did come in. We are reviewing that intently with our staff, but we hope that we can conclude with a final document here as we wrap up that comment review. I'm not sure we have an exact date for that, but it will end shortly as we begin those assessments per that. As we begin to bring the data in, we will follow this final assessment methodology that I approve for the development of the 2018 303D list that we will recommend to EPA for their review. A draft 303D list with the final assessment methodology, as I mentioned, will come out for public notice when these assessments are complete. A 30-day comment period will be held on that draft list, as they always are. A public hearing will be held, and a responsiveness summary of that draft 303D list will be posted on our website. So that's a very public, heavily involved process, but we at least are fortunate that EPA did act on our last submittal, and we're working with a new, fresh look at our 303D list for the first time in maybe 10 years. So we're pleased that we can work with a modernized and approved list at this point. We're looking to see what exceptions or additions we need to make. Something under that 303D list, it's really a 305B, and this is very technical, but there's a water quality report that's included as part of that process that looks at all the work we do. So while the 303D list is the list often reflected on because it lists those streams that need additional attention or sampling or controls, the 305B report, or the full water quality report, I think is in many ways more meaningful because it really gives you a better feel for how the health of all our streams and how those designated uses are being protected in our stream. And for the most part, many of those streams are protected, and many of those uses are protected through our actions, through our current state regulations. So I know the governor would want us to communicate that this isn't about creating new regulations. It's about protecting those uses that are set forth in our state standards. Wanted to bring up a subject that hit the news media related to a agricultural operation, the Sanders Hog Farm. Want to give you a little bit more information on that if you read the news reports on that. ADQ received a complaint regarding liquid animal waste runoff from an unpermitted hog farm in Newton County. As a result of the complaints, which were somewhat vague and not location specific, making it a bit difficult for the department to have to do our own GIS investigation using some of advanced technologies. As we began to hone in on an exact location, we were able to then, once getting the location identified in the initial report was vague, we were able to conduct inspections of the facility in August and October of 17. Those inspections led to a number of evaluations and studies to determine first what the activities were at the facility, whether they were subject to specific regulatory controls, and how they would be affected, or whether they were subject to the moratorium that is currently in place. What we observed, that there were exceedances and violations of not only our state water quality permitting program, but also the moratorium, in that it was determined that at least part of the operation and the majority of the operation where the hog operation did sit within the watershed, the Buffalo watershed, and did exceed the quantity of hogs that would trigger the moratorium applicability. So at that point, ADQ made the determination the most efficient and effective approach would be to approach and file a complaint in the Newton County Circuit Court on November 7th and requested a temporary restraining order on that operation. That the judge granted that temporary restraining order based on the inspection findings and the data and analysis that was conducted by ADQ. And at the November 11th hearing, the judge subsequently ordered the facility owner to clean up the site or waste from the site, stop all runoff, revegetate the area, confine hogs to the barns, and establish a functional dry litter system by January 11th, 2018. Our staff continues to go to the site, is working with other, I know ANRC and others that have been asked to get involved. We had actually involved those agencies in some part during the initial investigations, at least livestock and poultry and others, due to some reports of I guess, hogs that might be either ill or exhibiting concerns about illness. So, but through those interactions, we believe this facility will be addressed appropriately and brought into compliance as quickly as possible. So that's kind of where we are on that. It continues to be an ongoing responsibility for the agency, and we'll continue to work with other agencies as needed. So the other final report I had was on the nuisance algal bloom report on the Buffalo River. I know we're going to hear a presentation on harmful algal blooms to be distinguished from nuisance algal activity, and I wanted to bring that up, or algae. ADQ received 17 complaints of nuisance algae during the summer of 17. All the complaints that we received at that time were around the watershed of the Buffalo River. Now, we do get reports of nuisance algae across other watersheds, I think it would be fair to say at times, but in this case, we were receiving a number of complaints specific to an outbreak in the tributaries of the river. And so our water quality planning personnel did an excellent job in facilitating and working with National Park Service personnel to evaluate and monitor the extent of those bloom events from August to October. And this is the first time we've had an opportunity to really do a full measurement of the algae or algal bloom activity in the watershed, so that we began to create a historical record, if you will, to understand seasonal variations. Any watershed can create, we can see nuisance algal blooms in watersheds for various reasons, be it seasonal, natural, or man-induced, if you will. But we want to understand what we saw this past season. We want to put it in perspective. In the past, we've had limited reports and limited ability to get a full season view of what's going on. And so this was our first chance to, if you will, create a record and document that algal bloom event for 2017 with the idea that we'd like to begin to collect and get a better understanding of if it was a bad year, a good year, or an average year, and we're going to go through that process as we go forward. But hopefully we will also learn what can help reduce the frequency and reduce the potential for nuisance algal blooms in the future as a result of this activity. That was our goal. So, with that, I wanted to bring that up. We actually created another application of our ADQ app. If you have it on your cell phone, there's an app now that we use not only to get rid of your waste tires, if you need to find your closest waste tire site, which is a priority for that. It'll find where you are and it'll take you to the closest waste tire location you can take your waste tire to, free of charge, by the way. Or you can also report an algal bloom if you happen to see something that you want us to record and document. And that's not to create or throw shade, if you will, on our tourism, but really to allow us to get a better handle so that we don't have these photos that go up on social media and perhaps give the perception that we have a horrible situation when it may only last a day, or perhaps it doesn't. Maybe it lasts more. In this case, I think we saw a fairly lengthy algal bloom that existed for several weeks, but in many cases we see those eventually dissipate. And often when they're a one-day occurrence, obviously, even if we receive a report, we can't have people on the ground to see those before they actually leave. So we wanted to actually get samples taken and things to better understand exactly what that bacterial activity was and perhaps begin to understand what was causing it. So anyway, with that, that's where we are on nuisance algal activity, but I believe now I wanted to turn to Reed Green, with the benefit of the committee, to hear a report on the USGS work on harmful algal blooms and what you're doing with your workshop on that, which you can help educate us on the differences there.
I hope so. Thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. In 2015, we got together and Tate and I and a number of others and decided, what are we going to do about harmful algal blooms? In Kansas, Nebraska, Ohio, New England, and Florida, and a lot of other states have been dealing with cyanobacteria, harmful algal blooms for a number of years. But we haven't really had much going on in Arkansas, but we're seeing more and more of these events occurring. And so we came together and formed a statewide harmful algal bloom work group. And like you said, there's really a difference between harmful algal blooms and nuisance algal blooms. harmful algal bloom, we're talking in the inland waters, we're talking about cyanobacteria. And they're photosynthetic cyanobacteria, and they produce toxins. Not all of them produce toxins. Even those that do produce toxins don't produce toxins all the time. And it's an environmental thing. But many of the cyanohabs do produce toxins, and they can impact human health, wildlife and fish, and obviously that hurts the economy. And a nuisance algal bloom are just algae outbreaks that are just undesirable algae. The macroalgae, the filamentous algae that we see, and then there's the microalgae, which are the ones you see in the microscope, but they're in such mass you can see them like a scum on the water and that kind of stuff. And so here's a couple of pictures, photos. So we got nuisance algae on the left, and cyanohab, harmful algal bloom, toxin producers on the right. Now this was a picture taken by Carol Benning, this past season, and the culprit here is Spirogyra. It's a green algae. It's common. You find it all around the world. It's been in the Buffalo River probably its whole existence. And the Edagonium is another green algae. This was 2016, and I took this photo when I was up there in 2016. But Microcystis is a cyanobacteria. It's a single-celled organism, and it produces toxins, and this is what it looks like when it's on top of the water. And I don't know if y'all remember in Lake Gardnell about 10 or 12 years ago, but they had a lenguium problem on the shoreline. The whole shoreline was covered with this blue-green algae, filamentous type. And it not only was a nuisance in that it was getting in the props and anchors and the fishing lines and that kind of stuff, but it's also a known toxin producer. So that's just to distinguish the two. What we know about harmful algal blooms is they're becoming more frequently and predictable, especially in nutrient-enriched water bodies. There's 2.5 million acres of lakes in our nation that are at poor water quality. This is through the National Lake System that EPA produced. And then some algal blooms can be toxic, like I mentioned before. When they are present in your drinking water, they can enter the drinking water utility and they put the population at risk. And this happened in Toledo's water supply in 2014 when Lake Erie had a toxic algal bloom. It got in the water supply and it shut the Toledo plant down. And then they're also cause death of dogs and pets and livestock that drink the water. I think there's somewhere in the history in maybe in the 1600s in Europe where there was a report of the cattle dying from drinking pond water. So it's not like it's happened overnight. And then they obviously pose a risk for swimming and other recreational activities. And EPA estimates that about 48 million people are vulnerable to contaminated water through cyanotoxins, but it also affects the real estate value of recreation fishing. And the nutrient enrichment of our lakes and ponds and rivers are most widespread, costly, challenging environmental problem. Anyway, I want to put those down. I don't know if this is going to be shared online or not, and that would kind of build a framework. These are the toxins. There's 3 classes of toxins. Neurotoxins, nervous system, hepatotoxins, your liver damage, and your dermotoxins of your skin and gastrointestinal toxins. And they produce severe paralysis, respiratory failure, tingling, numbness, maybe death. And the neurotoxins, hepatotoxins, they'll dissolve your liver if you've got too much liver in it. And the nematotoxins will give you scratchy skin, and if you ingest it, they give you gastrointestinal distress. And so that's what we're dealing with. When we got together with this work group, a bunch of us are involved, and this is just, I don't want to move anybody off, but this is representatives from all this group. We got Central Water and Beaver Water District, the Department of Health working on the drinking water part of it. The Corps, they have the reservoirs. We've got academic institutions, consultants, and even federal agencies involved in this. It's a good group of people with a lot of experience in this stuff. Kind of give you a timeline on July 4th, or around July 4th, in 2011, Grand Lake in Oklahoma, they had to shut it down for a toxic bloom over the 4th of July holiday. And that created a lot of angst. And the economy got hurt as a result. EPA, or NOAA, resurrected the Harmful Algal Bloom Hypoxia Research and Control Act in 2014. And in July, actually it's probably early August, there's a July cold front, late July cold front, because this Nimrod was closed because of a harmful algal bloom where the cyanotoxins were high enough, according to World Health Organization levels, to close it down for primary contact because of the dermatoxins. And this was the same event that caused Lake Erie to mix and got into the Toledo supply. There was a cold front that went through that was across the nation, went into Canada. I was driving across Winslow coming south from Fayetteville, and it was foggy and drizzly, and my temperature on my neck was 48 degrees. And that's like July 28th. So that cold water caused these lakes to flip. The nutrients came up from the water underneath, created an algal bloom. In 2015, in August, is when we first met for our harmful algal bloom work group meeting. We since kind of co-hosted, shared, we're all involved in the Arkansas Water Resources Center annual conference in 2016, which was on harmful algal blooms, cyanobacteria. And so that's just kind of the history of what's going on. The goals of the work group are to develop communication between agencies and organizations. The first thing, when it happened with the Corps knew about it, but nobody else really did. I found out about it through Corps. If it happens in a game of fish lake, they'll contact Game of Fish, but nobody else knows about it. If it's a farm, lake, reservoir, they'll call the extension service, but nobody else hears about it. So we want to set up lines of communication, formally develop a monitoring plan perhaps on these lakes, the lakes that are most prone, or expected to be most prone for. And then just develop a response plan for both drinking water and recreational occurrences. They're going to be the like. And then last, come up with a signage and communication methods to get it out to the public. So that's our goals. Like I mentioned earlier, Department of Health, CW, and Beaver Water District are taking the lead on the drinking water side of this. All of them are collecting water, radiation across the state, and drinking surface water reservoirs. And a bunch of us others are doing the recreation part. We know the ADHS, call it swim beach monitoring, they're monitoring swim beaches for cyanotoxins. We've got to come up with a mechanism for doing that. And in the group right now, we're developing a monitoring plan and a recreational hazard response plan. The drinking water people already have a response plan with AWWA and EPAs. So for the response plan, we want to prioritize the water bodies that are based on risk. We want to identify those that are most susceptible for cyanobacteria blooms. Obviously, put on our plan, both research plan and science and communication. And this is kind of a flow chart of how this happens. When we say cell counts, we're looking at cyanobacteria cells, 50,000 gram out, 400 magnification and mics. And so, if we see 50,000 cells or more, we're going to measure the toxins. If we don't see 50,000 cells, we're going to continue to monitor, take samples, and keep our eye on the numbers. If we find the cyanotoxins exceed the levels, they'll either close it, or if they don't exceed, we'll put an advisory out. And so we go through this loop. This is kind of how it works. 50,000 cells, water samples collected and chilled. There's like a litmus stick that Braxis makes that will tell you if toxins are present and give you an idea if they're greater or less than 2 parts per billion. If they are, then we're going to send it to a lab as an analytical analysis. Microcystin is the toxin, it's sponatoxin that we're looking at. If they're greater than 20 micrograms per liter, So our future endeavors, like I mentioned, we want to develop a monitoring plan. We want to get our citizens involved, or a volunteer monitoring program. So we're going to start a volunteer pilot program here in Little Rock, on a local reservoir, and start with the second death. And I've been involved with the North American Lake Management Society since 1986. I was president in 2015. And a lot of states are doing citizen science, volunteer monitoring. They have for a long time. Florida's been doing it for 30 years. New England's been doing it that long and longer. So when I was president, I wanted to go visit the Florida Lake Management Conference and the New England Chapter, where they're doing volunteer monitoring, to learn how they were doing it. And it's amazing that you always hear about volunteer monitors that, you know, you can't use the data because of volunteers and things like that. But that may not be the case, because they take possession of what they're doing, they're real proud of what they're doing, and they're trainable, they're people that, you know, live on the lakes and that kind of stuff. And it works out really good, so you can do a lot with crowdsourcing, and we hope to do that. And in the process of drafting a guidance document, we're in the works of doing that. This is your lake. Now, this is Lake Observer app. This is from the Global Lake Observatory Network, and EPA and the foundation produced this app. A second depth is a little black and white disc that goes in the water and disappears. You measure the depth. And so that gives you an indication both of the turbidity in the water, if it's algae related and stuff. And so that you can type in a lot of data on this app, and it eventually gets stored in EPA in their database. So we want to use that as a tool. And then here's your reporting platform here for convention delivery platform. But we want to get the word out, and we may use, you know, the fishing guidebook and some other mechanisms for getting the word out. So there's some new developments that have just recently occurred, and it has to do with not the algae that are suspended in the water, but the ones growing on the rocks and the bottom, the benthic material. In 2016, USGS did a report looking at streams in the southeast U.S. looking for microcystin concentrations, and they found these toxic concentrations of microcystin in the streams, but they were all at concentrations that were, orders of magnitude lower than, you know, anything bad, but they're present. And then I've always, being a lake person, have wondered if the benthic cyanobacteria, the cyanobacteria growing on the sand and the rocks on the bottom of the lake is shallow, you know, veins with the sunlight at the bottom, whether they're not a source of you know, taste odor compounds and then the algal toxins, those toxins. And this report, I found this the last week. They found most winners for lots of microcystin in drinking water reservoirs in Australia coming off the material. So that's another thing we look at. And with that concludes the update.
Thank you. Is it fair to characterize that with the, you said Lake Nimrod, you were able to distinguish a difference between nuisance and harmful flume?
Yeah, Lake Nimrod was like this microcystin that you see on the screen. It wasn't a nuisance in that, yeah, I might have put a scum on the side of the boat or something like that. But it was the toxins, the concentration of toxins in the cell counts, which is the core side of the cell count stuff. They were using the Tulsa district. They had a contract with somebody that counted algae and they analyzed the water, so they were using the Tulsa contract.
Thank you, and I appreciate the value of this work group to finally provide a more coordinated fashion to respond. As I mentioned, many of these things happen often it's a short period of time, and if we are not coordinated and immediate in our response, then we lose the opportunity to really understand what's going on during that period of time, hopefully protecting the public, but also bringing better understanding, because I think it could be confusing. I know it's confusing to me, and I work in this area, but, you know, well, if you see algae in the stream, you know, is that, not that we want nuisance either, but is it something that's gonna be harmful, or just something that's gonna potentially affect our recreational use for a day or two, or in some cases maybe longer than that. So we wanna make sure that we first understand and help the public understand what their potential risk is, but also make sure that we're not somehow exacerbating or expanding the concern more than we should. So I know that's important as we communicate. And I believe our tourists that come to these are more lake focused, I guess, but as we look at these rivers and the use of the rivers, we want to also be able to communicate to the public the fact that it's safe, the safety of the use of the stream during these periods of seasons, which can happen due to weather changes that are somewhat unpredictable at times. So, any other questions? That was an excellent report, I think, and I find it to be very interesting and, as always, a little bit mind-boggling to try to figure all this out. So thanks for the scientists in the room that are working so hard to help us in this analysis. So. Well, I know we were going to have Caleb, I think I took your speech again. Would you like to step forward and say something more about the application that we have available for monitoring? That, again, was really focused on, not that the general public can tell, they may be able to, but the pictures tell 1,000 words in these situations, and perhaps with the picture report to us, we can help make that quick distinction and be able to report to Director Webb or others who might be interested in what's going on if we do see a bloom outbreak.
Yeah, I just wanted to pull this back up because it looks like he had the screen grab from our site. So, and just so everyone is aware that there's the two opportunities. There's one through our website, and there's also through the app, which we do have it for both iPhone and Android now. And that will be a continuing tool that we're going to be further developing, learning how to use more effectively. And so I guess from this panel, you know, I think we would, at least speaking as the Office of Water Quality, welcome any input or any other resources y'all have that we can couple with this to grow that. Director Keogh has really asked us to further develop and leverage our technology and what we have. So this is one step towards that. And as she mentioned, this gives us the opportunity to track and there's an opportunity to submit images and to locate specific locations. All these are things that will help us do our data collection and analysis better and more effectively. So we will continue to be developing this, but as the director said very well, I think this gives us a baseline going forward, moving away from sort of anecdotal of, 20 years ago or 15 years ago I saw something like that. We're going to have a collection of data and information that we can build on, and as you saw from Reed's presentation, there's a lot of really great cooperation going on around the harmful algal bloom concern, or harmful algal bloom issue, which is one area of this, but also for nuisance algal blooms we have that. So other than that, I think everything's been covered. So
Well, thank you, Caleb. But as we found with the app, not only, having the location-specific photos, although people aren't using it as much as we'd like, but if they would use it, it's amazing in Arkansas. And I just tell everybody that, when we get the complaint or a comment about a situation or a question, often it's like we'll drive to the Walmart and turn right and go 3 blocks and turn at the azalea bush and then go, and that makes it very difficult sometimes for us to follow up. So having a geocoded picture that takes us to that point makes sure that we can hone in on that area of concern a lot quicker and hopefully do some triage on those things so that we come with the right set of tools and right set of resources to follow up on those questions that come to us. So anyway, all that's good, and hopefully we'll find, I know a number of people are starting to copy the app, and we hope to be able to use it for broader services. So with that, just wanted So if you have ideas on how we can use it to benefit the Buffalo River watershed and any of your work and things we can add to our website or our app that might be beneficial, perhaps to a tourist or to, from a health department standpoint, let me know and we'll add those. We can look at those functionalities in that app as well. Anyway, with that, I believe we have a wrap-up or a update from Tony on the watershed management plan, and we'd love to hear where that process has taken us and where you are on that process, and then I believe Director Holland has some comments to make.
First of all, Caleb, you and I need to talk after this, but I don't know how you get to the record to do much reports. I need to figure that technique out. Next, Matt did an excellent presentation, and glad that did the presentation. Depending on which websites that you look at, there's a list of most coveted motorcycle riding roads. Several are in Arkansas, and I've ridden 6 of the top 10 or 12. And when I go to other states, and even out of the United States, people actually talk about doing Arkansas riding. So don't underestimate your motorcycles. A lot of things that you're going to hear me talk about is going to sound repetitive because some of the things that was brought out in the 4th meeting, it was at October 12th at Jasper. That was the last meeting of the development of the watershed management plan, the last meeting we would have with stakeholders. You're going to hear some of this was already talked about today. But we did have to hold that meeting. It was in Jasper. We had about 30 people to attend. And of course it included farmers, other stakeholders, people from agriculture and conservation and all aspects. Of course FTN, we contracted with them to facilitate those meetings. And what we always have done, we start the meeting by summarizing the previous meeting. But the focus of the Jasper meeting was to discuss management practices and activities to be included in the watershed management plan. Now this is within 5 distinct categories. Management practices, standalone category, monitoring, additional studies, awareness, outreach and education, and then teams or team building. And when we talk about management practices, we're looking at 3 categories here, or 3 different land types, or land uses, which is pasture, forest, and ecozones, or those edges. That's what we want to try to address. By doing vegetative establishment, concentrating on soil health, and stream bank restoration and stabilization. Now, the list would be way too exhaustive to go through each management practice that was discussed. We have all the information. We're synthesizing that information now and compiling it. The draft report, I am kind of jumping ahead, but the draft report should be available by the middle of this month. And we're making pretty good progress on that. And after it, the final draft is developed, will be put up on the website for 30 days for review. Under the monitoring aspect, there is a lot of things that goes on behind the scenes that a lot of people just don't know about. You've seen some with Reed's presentation, Dr. Green's presentation on Apple. But right now, they're in monitoring. There's an excellent water quality monitoring program going on in the Buffalo River watershed through the National Park Service and through ADEQ. But there's some things that I guess consensus of the meeting thought that there may be some additions that could be made. First of all, is support the design and implementation of algal monitoring program, which you see in the previous presentation that's being done. Another thing is maybe to develop a trash index. And a trash index would be used to assess maybe recreational impacts that could be seen. So during the recreational times of the year, by going into the tributaries or some of the sub-watersheds, what is left behind, it gives us an indication of not only the usage, but the impacts that those users may have. There was 3 additional studies that was recommended, and one being microbial source tracking in the Mill Creek watershed. Another study being DO monitoring be expanded to include all tributary sites currently being sampled. And then the third thing was, and Shelby, you can probably help me out here, but it's our understanding that LiDAR data coverage for the whole state through NRCS is going to be available statewide through March 18. If I understand, maybe you may have something a little earlier. But that's going to be available March 18, and this LiDAR data could actually be used as a prototype for an assessment of stream bank erosion and instability. We would want to do this first of all on a sub-watershed basis to see how well it worked. Now, subsequently, through the 319 program, we funded a project with university professors, no longer with the university, but Dr. Darman Saraswat, that he actually developed a program using LiDAR that he could measure from the center line of the stream over to the stream bank or the vegetative cover. And based upon the type of stream and the sinuosity of the stream, you have an indication of what the stream bank should have and how much riparian area you should have. We did develop that, promoted that to NRCS, but NRCS did not pick that up as a tool to be used in some of their plan. Since then, Dr. Saraswat has went to Purdue. Purdue has picked it up, and most of the Midwest are now using that tool. So that tool is available. So we may can grab it and get it back. Under the outreach and education awareness component, there's a lot of programs and activities that go on within a watershed, whether by agencies, group, non-governmental organizations. There's a lot of things that go on. But not all, or not everybody participates holistically in that. We need, and when I say we collectively, the agencies as well as the stakeholders, need to be participating in anything that goes on in that watershed. Promoting information, providing new information. We need to be all promoting. If there's a meeting that you know of, go. Say something about your agency or organization, what you do, what your mission is, and what you're trying to do within the Buffalo River watershed. We see that when meetings occur, depending on who's hosting the meeting, it kind of pigeonholes who shows up. In order for the watershed management plan to work, it's going to have holistic cooperation. And we're going to have consensus. We may not agree on everything, but we're going to have to find a few things to agree on and center around to start working together before we ever make any accomplishments. The last thing that was talked about was teams and team building. The thought was brought up that we need, or watershed implementation teams need to be developed. Now, this is not someone directing or having authority to someone has to do something or not. But what it would be within each sub-watershed, maybe 1 to 3 landowners or stakeholders in that watershed would collect information that other stakeholders would give them voluntarily. Hey, this is what I've done on my farm, on my property. These are the things I have done to try to help the watershed. It would be a way to collect information to assess what is being done pretty easily. And then the second thing was to try to develop some stream teams. We know that there is some stream bank instability within the watershed. Arkansas Game and Fish Commission has a great program with Arkansas stream teams. They have coordinators across the state. And they provide education about streams, as well as activities and things that can be done in the stream to help stream and water quality. And to our knowledge, right now, we don't know if there's a stream team that's been specifically developed within the Buffalo River watershed. So that kind of gives you a summation of the 4th meeting. Now, with that said, and what I said previously is we've got all the information, we're synthesizing the information, putting it together. What you have to realize that we have comments. We have one set of comments, and we'll have another set of comments that oppose each other. So how do we work that out? We're trying to go through and find the things that we do have consensus on, trying to find the things that we think would certainly better the watershed and the things that we all can rally around. That's, like I said, the final draft of the Buffalo River Watershed Management Plan is going to be uploaded to a website, be available for 30 days for your review. I hesitate to call it a public comment period because it's not a regulatory action. It's not like a public notice, but it will be up for you to review. And once it's up for the 30 days, we get that back, we're sure that we will get comments. We'll try to utilize what's applicable and integrate that into the plan. And once we do that, then that plan will be forwarded for review and acceptance by EPA. We are on schedule. I think we're probably a little ahead of schedule. There is one additional component that we are doing subsequent to the watershed management plan, and that's doing a source water assessment tool or a SWAT model, and that is under a separate contract. That's probably not going to be through until late February or March, and it would be my preference to submit the watershed management plan to EPA as a draft. Let them start their review, because their review can last anywhere from a month to 4 or 5. We don't control that. But go ahead and submit that to them and let them begin their review. And then as the SWOT model is completed, take the analysis of the SWOT model and forward that and integrate it into the watershed management plan. Because we don't want the plan approved, get the SWOT model, and have to amend the plan. Like that in all one package. Any questions?
Thank you, Tony, and I believe Director Holland has some comments, but I wanted to just ask, as you make these recommendations in this report, will there be specific things that perhaps are called out, hopefully under consensus, that could be taken up by the agencies for perhaps this next recreational season or next monitoring season that might be relevant to our work? Do you know?
I think Greg Rollins will address it.
I almost got it.
He paid me to introduce him that way.
You would pass those on down there. In speaking with Tony after we when he put his report together, he said there's some low-hanging fruit here that possibly some of the members of this committee could help with. And Tony, he's not new to this. It's about his 10th watershed management plan he's put together across the state, and I think we've got around 59 all total across Arkansas. But under the management practices, ANRC will work with the conservation districts up there and see if those farmers, those landowners up there have EQIP programs that have been funded in the past, work with NRCS, try to get some work started on some of that stuff if there is there, work with stream bank projects, whatever happens to come up. As far as like the Department of Health, they could do some work with sanitary surveys. That's something that I think if there's a few volunteers to get started with that, if they identify some problems, there might be some more people step up and say, hey, come and evaluate ours. And maybe that could start something rolling there too. We know that there are some of them that are probably failing up there and going through that karst geography. In the monitoring, the AEDQ could start looking at total suspended solids. They could give us be an important tool for Tony and his team to see what kind of stream bank erosion is occurring up there in that area. And outreach and education, this could be something that we work with the website on, but anytime we're doing anything, coordinate it with each other, make sure everybody knows what's going on. And there's a lot of things, Director Webb and I were talking the other day, those outfitters, when somebody's coming up there and they're going to go on a 10-hour trip or an all-day trip up there, what are you going to do when you have to go? Do they go over those things with them? Do they tell them about your litter, or do they say, here's your canoe, here's your paddles, see you later? But there's a lot of things like that we could share across different areas. Maybe involve Keep Arkansas Beautiful in the campaign in that watershed area up there. And then the teams, Tony mentioned Game and Fish has some stream bank teams. Make sure, maybe we could dedicate one to work in there in the Buffalo River watershed. And any of the non-governmental organizations, watershed groups, if they can identify some projects, bring them to us. We can work with you to get those done. There's several of us up here on this committee. We can find a way to maybe work some of those things out. And I think this is low-hanging fruit. And we're the Buffalo River Action Committee, so these are some really simple actions I think a lot of us can take here. And then we can consider some of those bigger things like the unpaved road program or dealing with the feral hogs or some of those other things as some actions that maybe the governor could help us identify some funds for. But I think this is a good start as we get to the end of the watershed management study and start into the next phase. Director, that's all I have.
I think this is excellent information for us to think about and incorporate as we go forward in our recommendations. As you said, our hope was to identify consensus around some short-term and, if you could call them low-hanging fruit opportunities. Obviously, we may not be able to avoid the status of, the water quality is what it is, as they say, and it's going to be affected by the stream use, but also various, nature and other effects. So what we want to do, though, is try to be as preventive and interactive as possible, and I think these speak to that. So excellent work by your team, Dr. Holland and Tony, for your leadership and direction to this group. I know you may have felt like herding cats at times, but not that people are cats, but we understand that is the nature. Not only is the water source adaptive, so are the people that live in the watershed, and we all bring our own individual characteristics and ideas, and that's the opportunity that we have. And I think the value of an action like a watershed management plan is that instead of us deciding here in Little Rock, or perhaps EPA deciding in DC or Dallas what we should be doing about our stream, we can self-identify those things that make the biggest bang, have the biggest bang for our bucks, and making sure that the watershed is what we want it to be as Arkansans. I think that's what the governor's looking for, is an Arkansas approach to water quality protection and watershed management. So with that, I'm going to conclude unless there's other comments. Are there any other questions? Did I forget it? I've kind of botched this agenda all day long, so I want to make sure I haven't messed it up totally. Just remember your voluntold assignments, if you don't mind, to bring us some information. These are great, excellent recommendations we'll incorporate. Look forward to input from the public through our now inaugural our website. Please offer any other presentations or ideas you'd like to see in future meetings. This committee will continue to operate beyond the watershed management plan. It sits at the call of the governor. We'll continue to meet to offer direction to the governor and to monitor the progress of some of these activities as we identify it. And we'll try to create effective ways to be more, not only to improve our communication among each other, which I think it has served a great purpose in that, but also to communicate with you and those of you that have taken the time to invest to be here today, and in other previous meetings. So please stay with us and continue to feedback what you think is helpful and informative. So with that, I'm going to conclude the meeting. Thank you for being here today so much.